To different people, wolf culture means different thing. And when we say wolf culture, you look at the strength of the wolf is the pack. The strength of the pack is the wolf. Is working together. And I think the wolf culture, the main thing is never give up. You strive. You will never say no. So you try hard to do that. People always strive to be successful. And end of the day, we are not just here to sell. You have to bring true values to the customer. So the wolf culture, from a positive note, is that people are always on the move, willing to do it as a pack, and we leverage one another. I think that's important.
Welcome to Brave. Learn from Southeast Asia's best tech leaders. Build the future, learn from our past, and stay human in between. No BS on success. I'm Jeremy Au, venture capitalist, serial founder, Harvard MBA, science fiction nerd, and dad of 2 daughters. Every week, we debate startup news, interview changemakers, answer listener questions, and share personal insights. Join our movement of over 40,000 members and get transcripts, resources, and community at www.bravesea.com. Stay well and stay brave. Join us at the Startup Conference Echelon X. Engage with over 10,000 of Asia's innovators and decision makers on May 15 and 16 at the Singapore Expo. We have 30 exclusive complimentary tickets for our podcast listeners. Sign up and use the promo codes BravePod or ECXJeremy to claim your free tickets now.
Hi, I'm really excited to have you on the show. It's a pleasure to see Huawei in action. Could you share a little bit more about yourself?
Great. Firstly, Jeremy, thanks for having me on this conversation. So my name is Hong-Eng. I'm a Singaporean, live in Singapore, but I report to Huawei headquarters. I'm part of the global public sector team because in the Huawei enterprise business, public sector is actually the largest chunk. We have customers around 100 countries in government, education, healthcare. So I'm actually leading the team of industry expert, partly because of my background. So I used to work for Singapore government in different jobs and also involved digitalization. And that was when I got to know different companies. In fact, I joined the first company in my life, MNC, partly because of my jobs in Singapore government. And after spending 16 years in US company, I joined Huawei more than 8 years ago.
Amazing. We'll definitely get into that, but could you share a little bit more about what you were like in your first few jobs? You were in the government. What was that like?
Sure. In fact, for me, it was not much of a choice because Singapore, many of us were encouraged to apply for scholarships. Likewise, when I was in junior college, I guess my result was okay, and I was encouraged to apply for scholarship, and for all you know, I received a police scholarship. So I ended up as doing different jobs, including criminal investigation, operation, crime prevention, and so on. But my last position was heading the technology.
So obviously the police force, it's very much on the ground, and then you say you're doing some of that digital transformation. So what does that look like from your perspective?
So at the time, that was in the 1990s, right? So I think that was still very much the simple computerization, or we call it digitalization. So basically, it's from offline to online. So many of the manual processes are computerized to make it more efficient. For example, a long time ago, to lodge a police report, it will be manually written. Yeah. Can you imagine? But today it's all computerized. And of course, computerization is not just to make it more efficient, because once you capture the data, you can do a lot of analytics as well. That will be the subsequent phases of the transformation.
And then after that, you joined the private sector. Could you share more about that?
It was semi-private because of the background in technology. So I joined NCS, National Computer System, and I was very fortunate because when I joined NCS, that was when Singapore was really moving at a fast speed in terms of the whole digital transformation of the government. So I was involved in the very first major project called the Public Services Online, where we try to offer citizen or people-centric services, because in any government, any country, or whether it's federal government or city government, they tend to have stovepipes because different professionals in different departments, so end up with a silo system. So we were trying to provide that citizen-centric services. So that was the very exciting project that I did. And since then, I think Singapore has been ranked very highly in terms of e-government compared to all the other countries.
That was really the heyday of NCS especially.
Exactly.
So what were some projects that you did back then?
Okay, a lot was a nationwide project because NCS back then was already a big company, corporatized under NCB and subsequently acquired by Singtel, right? And over there were many teams, but I was mainly doing government-wide projects. In fact, there was a project called Broadband Infrastructure for Government. So it's basically sharing the networking, sharing the data center, and right down to the public services online, where we built a public services infrastructure to provide citizen-centric services, whether it's G2C or G2B, getting the whole of government to work together. And little did I know that started the trend for many national digital transformation.
Yeah, I mean, since then, the Singapore government and the public-private sector has really been focused on that digital transformation wave. Do you remember some of the trade-offs or kind of like planning parameters? Because a lot of people look to Singapore today as that model.
I think number one, Singapore, I always say, I've been doing international business for 20 over years, even before Huawei. And the good thing is that the Singapore brand is definitely helping my career a lot. So everywhere I go, oh, Singapore is very successful. So I'll definitely be thanking them. Thank you for seeing highly on Singapore. But the success of Singapore, I would say, cannot be easily replicated because of the environments, the parameters, right? So things like the stability in the government, that's very important. And being a small country has its advantage. And the other thing is, of course, the literacy in the public service, the citizens, these are all important. And of course, the budget itself, whether you're willing to invest. But in terms of true digital transformation, the top difficulty will always be bureaucracy, agencies trying to protect their own infrastructure and data. And this is why more and more countries are getting successful when they elevate the organization that is driving national digital transformation. Because traditionally, whether it's e-government or digital transformation, maybe it's done at one of the Ministry of ICT and so on. But many governments realize that for that to happen, you have to be above all the agencies. So for example, many years ago, China started the Big Data Management Bureau. And in every province, the Big Data Management Bureau reports to the governor directly, right? But over the years, they actually dropped the word big. So now they call it Data Management Bureau. But it's the same in Saudi Arabia. They created an organization called SADAI, Saudi Data and AI Authority. And again, they are the one driving the national data center, national cloud, even the national use of AI. So the whole of government works together. So if you talk about digital transformation, especially digital government, the whole of government are working together with the relevant governance and the structure at a high level. I think those are important success factors.
I think what's interesting is that you would think that bureaucracy, everybody be jumping at the chance to digitalize because we're making things more efficient. Why is it that bureaucracy doesn't seem to work out especially for this kind of transformational stuff? Like normally programs by programs are very good, infrastructure programs. But it feels like digital transformation always seems to be an order of complexity more difficult.
I think without fail, every country, I've been to 88, 89 countries as part of my job. And every country, every government knows they have to do something on digitalization, on digital transformation. But most of them tends to do it department-centric. So Ministry of Education want to do their own thing, Ministry of Finance do their own thing, Ministry of Social Security want to do their own thing, which is not wrong. They are doing what they are good in. But in terms of the whole government perspective, because the citizen or the businessman or the visitors see the government as one. I don't see you as different agency. So it's important. And not only that, we are not just talking about the people-centric services, we're also talking about consuming the infrastructure, the budget of the country. Because if every department wants to build their own network, their own data center, their own cloud platform, it's going to cost a lot of money to the government. This is why in Huawei, the Global Public Sector Department, we are pushing the concept. Digital transformation at a true digital transformation must be what we call one network, one cloud, one platform. When I say one network, it doesn't mean one network because there are different types of networking technology, but it means that it's a unified network that can be shared by different agencies. Of course, we take into consideration different agencies may have different needs on cybersecurity, data protection. The second layer, when we say one cloud, again, it doesn't mean one physical cloud. It could be a mix of cloud, but again, it's the unified way of doing things. And lastly, the platform is where we talk about data governance and also talk about all the AI tools and so on and so forth. If you look back at the 40, 50 years ago, when Singapore government started the National Computer Board to do the National Computerization Program, that was, I believe, it's 40 years ago, we tend to build systems by itself. So there's a need for tax collection, we build a system. There's a need for hospital information system, we build a system. And when we build a system, it means the application, the database, the server, the storage, the network is very silo. Then over the years, maybe years ago, we start seeing the hardware and software decoupling. So the hardware is a layer, software is a separate layer. So you are not locked into particular hardware. This is what we talk about hardware virtualization. But I think today's context, especially moving forward, where transformation is happening very fast, where you can roll out many services, especially with AI, we are seeing the data decoupling. So the data is decoupled from the software is decoupled from the hardware. So the more it makes sense, you have the one network, one cloud, one platform approach. And all the services in future, sometimes we call it microservices. It's not going to be a very hard software with the database is built in. So the data should be separate at a layer. But when we do all these things, we always have to be mindful of cybersecurity, privacy issue, And of course, the latest topic is on sovereignty.
We'll definitely circle back to that. And then from there, from NCS, you left. Where did you go to?
Okay, because of the PS Online project, the whole system was architected on Java technology, and we ended up using a lot of servers and storage from a company called Sun Microsystems. It's a US Silicon Valley company. In fact, the slogan for Sun back then was, the network is a computer. Sun was way ahead of his time. That was 20, 30 years ago. They called the network as a computer. Basically, they realized the power is in the network, which is like what we call cloud computing. So because of that project, PS Online, someone in Sun Microsystems got to know me and hired me. So I joined Sun. I was there for more than 10 years. And again, I was doing different positions from local to regional to global because of my public sector background. So it's a mix of smart city, safe city, education, healthcare. And after 10 years, Sun was acquired by Oracle. So I ended up in Oracle for another 6 years. But the 16 years I spent in the US company, more or less is doing as an industry expert to help customers see their needs and to design their business architecture, leading to a technical architecture.
Amazing. What did you learn at Sun as well as Oracle?
Good question, because that was my very first MNC. And of course, it was a culture shock to me because I used to work from Singapore government or government-linked company. Then I went to Sun Microsystems MNC. It's interesting, I do have many Singapore friends that they were already working in American MNC. And one strong advice was always, when in MNC, you work for yourself. You don't work for the company. Okay, it sounds quite profound, but basically what I'm trying to say is that those MNC companies, they don't really take care of you. So you have to, whatever you're doing is you are there to make money. Of course, you must make sure you are helping the company to make money. That's why you can earn money. But you have to balance. That's what they're saying. The other thing of interest was when I joined Sun, I got to know the history, the values of Sun. And one of the famous quotations that I always remember was from the chief scientist of Sun back then, this gentleman called Bill Joy. Bill Joy was one of the founders. He was a chief scientist. He always said that the smartest person is not in this room. Very important, because I feel that if you think the smartest person in this room is probably, there's no more progress. So we must always be very open-minded. We are not the best. We need the best, or we collaborate with the best. And I think even Mother Teresa was quoted saying that, right? I can do what you cannot do. You can do what I cannot do. Together we can do great things. So I think that collaboration is important. The moment an individual or a company or in personal life, you think you're already at the best, it means you're at a peak, you start coming down.
And I think what's interesting is that there's also, like you said, the network as a computer as well, right? There was a lot of that debate between closed source, open source, alliances versus in-housing. Could you share a little bit more about that wave?
I think we are still talking about that. After a few decades, we are still talking about that, isn't it? If you look at mobile phone market, you have the Apple that is totally closed, it's proprietary because they think it's better, safer. Of course, you have the Android, and Huawei now has the Harmony, which is more open. So I think the debate will always be there, because if you talk open source software, some people will say that you get to control the software, you can see the vulnerability and so on. But at the same time, people will say even the bad guys will be seeing. So I think end of the day, each has its own merits and of course some disadvantages as well. But in what we are seeing today, I should say, fortunately, I should be more positive. Fortunately, we are living through this age of the trade war that we get to experience what it's like. And digital sovereignty becomes very important. So open source software last time was more in terms of ease of working with other modules, in terms of supposed to be more secure than closed source. But now open source is also important to save the country digital sovereignty, that you actually own it, that you can do something about it. But I think the debate will ongoing, and I don't think it will reach a day that someone will make a decision which is the best, right? So whether it's open source or closed source, what is important is the standards behind. Even a closed source, you can have standards. Because remember what I said earlier about collaboration, working together. So even Huawei, we feel strongly that we need that ecosystem. We need to work together, whether it's hardware, software, or other components. It's important to achieve that greatness effect just because we are working together. And for technology to work together, it's important to have that standards.
What's interesting is that time felt was an open environment or time, right? Because a lot of this, like you mentioned, of the trade war and all that stuff, it feels more current. But that time, I felt like the whole internet was free and open.
Very free, very open. And that time when the world is really globalized in technology, we are seeing lots of innovation and R&D, and that's important. In fact, if you look at the US, it used to be a very good place. It's so open. You look at Elon Musk, you look at Mark Zuckerberg, they were not Americans. They moved there. So I think the openness is important to work together. So it's a scientific community. I still remember when I was a young government officer, when we travel, we need to carry different mobile phones because of different standards. Right. But slowly the world moves to GSM. So one device, can be used in any country. So that is the ideal world. But my fear is with the trade war, are we going to see a splinter net? Are we going to see technology diverging and end up we're going to use different devices or different standards, right? So for a small country like Singapore, definitely would be a concern because that will increase our costs.
So I think these are all things that people are concerned about, right? Like trade war, decoupling, digital sovereignty, splinter net. Could you share a little bit more about what you're thinking or what you're observing?
I think end of the day, politics being politics, they still need the voters. And I think any country, the people must make a decision through the votes. Because what is good for people is people can see. As I said earlier, if there's a divergence of technology, it's not going to be good for many people. The cost may go up and all this thing, and it's not good for innovation. So I'm still very positive. I don't think it will go back to the old days. But we probably will see a new norm that the way we cooperate and the way we compete. So it's a competition. And I think largely is due to the lack of awareness. Because like it or not, we are living in a world where there's lots of fake news. So if you are a person that is very gullible, you're not doing your own research to see what's happening out there, you may be easily influenced by the media, whether it's a mass media or social media. So this is why the younger generation, especially generative AI, that skill to differentiate, to analyze the context, what is true, what is not true, is becoming even more important because otherwise you can be easily influenced by the media, especially generative AI.
We'll definitely get to there. When we talk about the splinter net, what's interesting is that it feels like the world used to be like converging on common standards, right? So like GSM, and then everybody felt like we were all converging on the same standard bodies as well to kind of push them out and advance the frontier. But it now feels like there's almost like a duplicate of everything, right? There's one left, one right.
It's not that bad. It's not that bad. We're still here, so we are still working on the same path. But because of some irresponsible political move, we may see certain hiccups along the way. But I hope that common sense prevails and things will be back on track. But having said that, there is a good side effect because I think, again, if you ask me when I was in Sun Microsystems, one of the things that Sun as a company was very strong promoting it is that the competition drives innovation. Competition drives innovation, which is good. If that is the principle, it's good.
And I think it's interesting because earlier you were sharing with me about how Huawei has been really doing a lot of fundamental R&D, right? You can get clear on a standard and you're like, hey, I can build a better version of this, right? So can you share a little bit more about the R&D focus?
Okay, Huawei, unlike my previous company, it's interesting, partly because we are a private company, or most of the employees are the shareholders. We are not owned by any institution. So we are very willing to invest in R&D. And this is why we are doing well consistently over the years, despite the international pressure and of course, despite the COVID and so on. If you look at Huawei, we have more than 200,000 employees, but more than 55% are in R&D. And our R&D is not just in China, it's all over the world. Even in Singapore, we have quite a big number of R&D engineers. So our R&D labs are all over the world, especially in Europe as well. And if you look at our spending, the last few years, we spent more than 20% of our revenue back to R&D. I think on average, a Western technology company, we're talking about 10%. So we spend double that. And the spending, the headcount that we have, and patent registration. So for the last 6 years, if you look at the record of the United Nations World Intellectual Property Organization, we are the number one in applying patents. Number one for 6 years, we apply. But of course, if you apply patents without coming out with innovation, that's useless. Yeah. So those R&D, those patents lead us to many technologies, like the Neuralink that I was talking about. And there are many examples. There are tons of examples. In fact, after 16 years in US MNC, I was getting a bit complacent because day in, day out, I'm doing my job. I'm the experts in this public service transformation. I know what I'm doing. Yeah. So you're a bit stagnant. But Huawei is a company because literally every year we launch new products. And the new products actually keep us very excited because we are the industry expert. We must be able to see the value of the product back into the industry. So I'm going to give you one specific example. Hospitals, healthcare. It's very common now in China. Healthcare, hospitals, everything is wireless. Even your intravenous drips, all your sensors. I'm wearing a Huawei watch with an airbag that can do this blood pressure. It's all sensors. But your biggest problem is Wi-Fi access point. I'm not sure whether you encounter when you have a big house or big office, we have too many access points, it interferes with one another. When you have too few access points, there's a blind spot. Yeah. So can you imagine the patient being pushed around from the ward to the X-ray room and somehow the signal lost? And the nursing station may thought this guy, the heartbeat or whatever, right? So this is not acceptable. So what did Huawei do after we hear such a feedback from customer? We went back to the drawing board. We come out with a new product, new technology. Because typically, if you look at a Wi-Fi access point, it has 3 layers of technology. The controller, the radio unit, and the antenna. So controller, radio unit, and the antenna. It's in a box. So what did Huawei do? We split up that into 3 parts. So our controller is a box, and we are connected to 8 radio units. Each radio unit can be connected to 8 antennas. 8 multiplied by 8 is 64. And so this whole thing is one access point with 64 antenna. So in the whole hospital ward, you can deploy this one access point with 64 antenna. So when your device is connected to the antenna, it's okay to connect to multiple antenna because it's the same system. So you have what we call this data loss roaming in the concept. So we actually come out this product mainly for the use case in hospital. But of course, it can use in actually hotels as well. But it will not be good for a classroom because you're talking about hundreds of students. So concurrently, if you have too many devices, you still need traditional Wi-Fi. But this is one example that we always listen to voice of customer and try to come up with new innovation. Not only we solve customer problem, we created a product that others don't have. That will increase our revenue. And this is why if you look at global public sector, at least for the 8 years that I'm in Huawei, our global public sector business has been growing very healthily. Despite all the rumors, all the fake news, we are doing very well. And as I say, our public sector customers are in more than 100 countries. So we're actually well trusted by many government agencies around the world.
And you know what's interesting is that it really feels like it's not just obviously the number of patents, but it feels like the velocity, right? Because you can put a large R&D budget, but you know, it feels like the velocity, that the throughput or the output seems to be on a faster cycle. Or how does that work from your perspective?
Okay, it's again because of the headcount that we have and the process. In fact, our integrated product development (IPD), I remember Huawei many years ago paid millions of dollars to IBM to help us do the consultancy to come out IPD. So IPD is a very stringent process from concept to product to alpha beta, right? So the whole process is well, and as I said, we have a huge number of engineers to do that. And sometimes, as I said, when you're forced in a corner, you work even faster. So if you look at during COVID, our Wi-Fi access point was selling very well, even in European countries. And for many reasons that, number one, there was a global shortage, right? And number two, the cost. But we maintain low cost. In fact, my competitor, to buy the Wi-Fi, to sell the Wi-Fi access point, it may take 8-9 months to deliver. Huawei committed and we deliver in 5-6 weeks. And it's not just a product. So the IPD, the integrated product development, right down to the sales marketing, I think we are a very cohesive organization to push that. And every product, we don't just, although we listen to customer, we also have to do a lot of due diligence, whether there is a value, because we are still a profitable company. We are not a non-profit company. We must make sure whatever product we do can sell and all these things. And we also have a good management of supply chain. That's important because our R&Ds are everywhere. We have manufacturing in different countries, but also the supply chain. So during the pandemic, I think there was a global slowdown in the supply chain, but Huawei still managed to do well in terms of all this supply chain, the products coming together. But I think what is important is the will. It's the will in Huawei. If you look at the core values of Huawei, I think I tried to recall the 4. The first is customer focus. Customer first, customer focus. Number 2 is, if I translate, is basically you must really work hard, persevere, and so on. The third, we must be willing to work in a very difficult environment. And the 4th is self-reflection. In fact, the 4th is very interesting because in the original Chinese version, if you do a direct translation to English, it means self-criticism. But many foreigners, including myself, would be a bit worried, right? Why am I joining a company that I need to criticize myself? So the English version, we call it self-reflection. So basically, the culture in Huawei is that we are prepared to work hard. We work hard, we are prepared to work even harder, even in harsh environment. When I first joined Huawei, I was very curious why many countries in Africa like to use Huawei. And I found the reason. It's not because of whatever people say, because there's funding, whatever. It's because the willingness for Huawei people to continue to serve the customer. Remember Ebola? Ebola was very deadly. During Ebola, most Western companies pull out. Huawei stayed on, and the employees stayed on. They were not forced, they stayed on. They stayed on because they want to serve the customer. That is the Huawei culture, and they know by winning deals, they also get to earn money because this company is employee-owned. So whatever we make, it doesn't go to institution, it goes to them. So of course, there's still the monetary incentive, right? But end of the day, it reflects the culture. It reflects the culture of the company. This is why even during COVID, after I was stuck in Singapore for 18 months, I was getting a bit unsettled and I was preparing to travel. Of course, my family was worried, but with a lot of assurance because Huawei actually did a great job in terms of protecting our own employees. So I traveled to Africa. So when I went to Africa, the customer was like, are you crazy? Most of the Western companies pull out and you guys are still flying here to meet us to help us solve problems.
And you mentioned that you were feeling stagnant in a Western MNC and then you were surprised when you entered Huawei. Could you share this with me into how and why you chose to join Huawei?
Okay, it's not really stagnant. I'm so used to doing my job, I'm getting very comfortable. In fact, to some extent, maybe a bit complacent. But Huawei is a company, partly because of the innovation. It keeps coming with new technology. And I always like to say, Huawei has so many products. And in public sector, we are probably the only industry I can sell any product that Huawei has. It may not be relevant to, some product may not be relevant to banking industry. For example, I even sell critical radio communication system for emergency services. Banking doesn't need that, right? So we have many things. So that keep me excited because I'm an industry specialist. I like to help customer with the digital transformation. So that keeps me going. And number two, as I said earlier, because of the values, the work culture is really quite pressurizing to work in Huawei because the expectation is very high, right? But why did I join Huawei? In my last company, at the job that I was holding as an industry expert, I was actually at the highest level. I was already at highest level. So it's a very senior position in my previous company. So when Huawei found me through a hunter, I was not interested at all. Partly, I did not know anything about Huawei. That was before the trade war went open. That was before the US targets Huawei. So everybody did not know about Huawei. The only thing I knew about Huawei was the fiber modem in my house. Because in Singapore, we have the next generation broadband, the fiber. Actually, it's all Huawei. So the only thing I know is Huawei because I'm not from the telecommunication industry. I don't know about 3G, 4G, 5G. And at the time, I did not use Huawei phone. So I did not know. So I was a bit sarcastic, actually. I told the headhunter that in my company, I was already the most senior. Why do you want me to join a Chinese company selling router? She and I sort of laughed it off, but she did not give up on me. So for the 1 year, she kept in touch with me and got me to talk to different people. And I did my own research and I spoke to some Singapore friends who are working in Huawei to find out more. But what changed my mind was really when they invited me to Shenzhen to take a look at the real stuff that they have. I tell you, the moment I saw it, I was like, wow, so this is Huawei. Okay, firstly, a lot of us have this bad, wrong impression that China product is cheap, is no good. It's not true. End of the day, whether a product is good or not is not due to the manufacturer. It's due to the businessman driving it. If you're prepared to pay high cost, you get good quality, such as iPhone. Most iPhone today still is made in China, right? But if you want to make a lot of money, you get the lousiest factory to build. Of course, the quality is bad. So when I went to Shenzhen headquarters of Huawei, I was surprised by the depth, the breadth of technology that Huawei has and in terms of quality. So that really changed my mind. Then, of course, it came the relevant interview that convinced me. And don't forget, at the time, I did not know what was ahead of me. Because at the time, I thought Huawei is just another MNC. It's just MNC. I did not get into the side that I'm not sure what's ahead. The US is going to take action against Huawei. But we have come a long way. So I've been in company already more than 8 years.
And you mentioned that one of the things that you had changed to was the culture, right? So could you share more about what you felt was the transition in that culture from your perspective?
For me, it's Singaporean. You and I, Singaporean, we know why Singapore culture. I was in US MNC for 16 years. I'm used to the culture. So when I first went to Huawei, of course, it was a culture shock. Very different. And basically, everyone is expected to work hard. But the good thing is you get compensated because of the system in Huawei, right? If the whole company do well, not just your department, you get better bonus. And we have a sort of a share scheme, even though we are not publicly listed. There's some sort of private share scheme. So based on the share that you have, you get dividend. So the culture working hard is definitely there. And frankly, there's no black and white to force you must work every day or whatever. But people tend to behave this way. So you still have people that have a proper night off or weekend off. But you see very often that people just stay on. So even when I sometimes travel to China for meeting, I'll be in the office until 9, 10 p.m. or weekend you have training. I'm not sure whether that is a China culture. But of course, remember Jack Ma did talk about 996, right? So I guess it's similar in other Chinese companies. But in other companies will be probably different. But interestingly, Huawei, we do abide by the local practice or even local legislation. So for example, Huawei office in Europe, some of the Euro country, we must abide by the rule. Up to certain hours, your lights must be switched off, all these things. So we do follow. But in terms of the culture, a key thing what I'm seeing the difference is that people know for every effort they put in, if any result, they will get the reward, right? It's quite different public listed company. And the other thing is that in this company, everyone is trying their best. People will not say no to you. I'm not sure whether it's a Huawei culture or a Chinese culture, but people will try their best to help you achieve what is needed. But the other culture is interesting, very different from the West, the frankness. So during the meetings, everyone very frank, straight to the point, even literally saying you're not good, all these things. Whereas the Western world is that in the meeting room, everybody tends to be more kind to each other. But unfortunately, outside the meeting room, that's where things happening. People talk behind your back, whatever. But in this company, people tend to be more frank. And remember, I said there are 4 core values. The last core value, self-reflection. We do that actually on a systematic way. So the certain people in Huawei, certain level and above, every year, you're supposed to have a self-reflection session. And you'll be open to anyone, not just your bosses, your subordinates, your colleagues, or anyone can join to listen to yourself criticizing yourself. And if you do it too mild, people will start commenting. And in Huawei, we actually built a system where people can comment anonymously. So some people, if you open too direct, they won't want to say. But basically, this self-reflection thing is so institutionalized that people are willing to expose their weaknesses and to say what we must do to learn, to improve, and so on. And likewise, people tend to be very upfront. This is why some foreigners, I'm also a foreigner, I'm not a Chinese, working in Huawei, initially they have a hard time adjusting. They are adjusting to this frankness. People will tell you this, tell you that. But ultimately, I think generally, people are attacking the issue, not the human.
And you previously wrote on your past writing about Huawei's wolf culture, right? And obviously, a lot of the press has also written about it. But often it feels like a very external view. Could you share a little bit more about what the wolf culture means?
I think to different people, wolf culture means different things. And when we say wolf culture, you look at the strength of the wolf is the pack. The strength of the pack is the wolf. Is working together. And I think the wolf culture, the main thing is never give up. You strive. You will never say no. So you try your hard to do that. You look at how Huawei started. Because we are late in the game. Frankly, we are late in the game, whether in telecommunication or enterprise business. But Huawei people don't give up. I've experienced that many times. So that if you try to convince a customer we are the best choice, most of them say, no, who are you? I've been using a Western company, all this thing. I don't want to use you. But Huawei people don't give up. The culture, we don't give up. We will just continue to approach a customer. Actually, just like they never give up on me, right? When they try to hire me over. So they keep doing it until the customer one day says, oh, you are really very determined. Maybe I'll give you a chance to talk to you to see. So I think this wolf culture is important in the context that people don't give up. People always strive to be successful. And end of the day, we are not just here to sell because in every country, Huawei is there for that country. Most country, we hire 70-80% of the local employees. So it's important that we sustain our business. And to do that, we cannot be a fly-by-night company. You have to bring true values to the customer. So the wolf culture, from a positive note, is that people are always on the move, willing to do it as a pack, and we leverage one another. I think that's important.
What's interesting is that when you describe wolf culture as a company culture, right, and from 2 different dimensions, but it feels like when you read the press, the wolf culture is quite negatively portrayed. I'm not sure how you feel about that.
Okay, firstly, I think wolf culture is not really a Huawei culture. Remember I said the Huawei 4 core values, right? But it's the spirit of never give up, that even in a very difficult situation, we will still fight on, and also leveraging on one another because the wolf is strong because of the pack, and likewise vice versa. But I think the moment, because I used to spend 16 years in US culture, US company, and 8 years in Huawei, and we sell almost the same thing. The only thing is Huawei can sell what many companies must come together to sell because of the entire stack of technology that we have. So it's so clear to me, the world of double standard. People want to bring you down. People want to discriminate against you. Anything can also be in a negative way. So that is the thing to say. But I think we will just leave it to our innovations, the patents we register, the new products, our business, our sales to speak for ourselves. You know, customers are not stupid, especially government. Even in Europe, quite a few advanced Western governments are using our solution. So this is why there is a great difference between what you read on the media and the truth. So when people want to bring you down, anything can be negative.
And I think what's interesting is that through this partnership, I've also got an opportunity to see the whole conference. And it really feels that AI is the big theme here, right? And I think it's relevant because of the innovation, R&D side. So, there's the storage, there's the controllers, everything else was really about a strong AI focus. Could you share more about the perspective on AI within Huawei?
Even before I talk about AI, if you look at my last 30, 40 years of career from public service operation to technology, right? Technologies come and go. It was just how long ago when everybody was going crazy with metaverse. Hardly anyone is talking about that now. So whether it's metaverse, blockchain, all sorts of technology, it come and go. And even AI, I think is a natural progress. When your data built up, initially there was no data. You do digitization, computerization, you start having data. When data getting more, you do big data analytics to create more value. And when data grow even more, you move to AI. And AI now you move to AI large models. You move to generative AI. Even AI has gone through different generation, right? But about 5 years ago, in many open occasions, I like to say the future use of AI will be as user-friendly as using a Microsoft Office, for example. And true enough, today you have ChatGPT that you can use it easily without programming. And my point is that 5 years later, probably nobody will talk about ChatGPT because it's so common now. There will be some other technology by then. So if you look at the history of technology evolution, but what is important is the data and the values the data create. It's not the technology. It's not the AI. So it's the values of the technology. And as part of industry revolution, certain things could not be done previously because before the revolution, before the new technology, right? Like before the steam engine, there was no steam engine. Of course, you can't go into steam engine, locomotive and so on. So likewise, this technology help us to actually squeeze even more values from the data. But ultimately, it's about people. Whatever technologies is to manage the data, and whatever you're doing is to extract the best value from the data to serve the people. I think it's all about people. Any industry is always about human, about people. You may say it's robotics, whatever, but ultimately it still reach the people. So from a public services perspective, I've been driving the concept that a true digital transformation, a national or government digital transformation, not only we must provide people-centric services, but we must provide proactive and personalized services, the 3P. So people-centric, proactive, and personalized. So for example, in many countries, to open a restaurant, you need to apply for so many permits across different departments. We are still seeing that in many countries. In fact, recently I also read the news. Even in Boston, you have to go through that, right? So that is only the people-centric part. Many governments will stop there to offer people-centric services. But with big data and AI, I can actually analyze to provide you proactive and personalized services. For example, proactive, you want to open a restaurant, obviously you need to hire people. So why can't I analyze all the graduating students' record from the Ministry of Education and to recommend some to you because you need to hire them and you save them from looking for job. It saves you from looking for candidates. That is being proactive. And personalized is because you want to open certain restaurant. It's a Japanese restaurant. And because Japanese restaurant, you need a location where there are many Japanese or Japanese loving, food loving people. That is the most appropriate place for you to rent to open a restaurant. Or maybe because of Japanese food, you need to have the special rice and we can recommend the suppliers and that will help you lower the cost. Well, regardless of big data or AI, ultimately it should provide that values to the people. But having said that, AI, we are seeing a very fast change, right? From a normal machine learning, we go to unsupervised learning to deep learning, resulting in large model. So in the traditional AI, you can do simple AI models for different things. But the large model is really getting interesting, where I always say large model is conventional AI on steroids. So you can do a lot more, but it means that it generates a lot of things. And I think we have seen Sora, for example, generative AI. But like some of the event that you attended today, you realize is the cost-benefit analysis. Does it make sense? I still remember one of the speakers was saying an interesting thing, that the money that you spend to buy the GPU server and technology to generate the video is many times higher than to hire the Hollywood star and the whole production crew. So you reach a stage. Now, generative AI, a lot is a very novelty type of things. It's exciting, but is there real business value? Going back to the value to the human. So do we really need that? Unless you tell me today you can generate a video at 20% of the cost of a full video production, then it makes sense. But today it's still not. So today, generative AI or large model, we are still seeing many novelty, nice to have things, but frankly has little value to human, to people.
You know, what's interesting as I was watching all the presentations was that it was not just focused obviously on the microchip setting, which is I think very much the focus of every newspaper article in the press in terms of the chip war, for example. But I thought I got to see the whole suite of the memory, so far the whole one-stop shop. So you were discussing a little bit about that, like the bottlenecks and the chain. Could you share more about that?
I think people, obviously AI, if you understand how AI works, you're doing thousands of iterations per second to train up the model with lots of data. That's why you need GPU. But CPU is not good enough or not fast enough, you need GPU. Unfortunately, most people spend focus on the GPU. And in the real world, you realize many organizations spend a lot of money to buy the graphical processing unit. But if you check the utilization rate, it's not that high because the whole system is not just GPU. You must interconnect to your storage or all sorts of things. So this is why potentially you have different bottleneck. The connectivity is a bottleneck. Even the storage performance is a bottleneck. And very often in a system, any millisecond delay in the storage could means minutes of delay in the whole system. And this is the same because in technology world, there's no single super machine that do everything. We are in an open architecture. We have different layers of technology. It's the same when Huawei first came out with 5G, right? A lot of people think, oh, Huawei is strong in 5G, meaning the base station, the antenna, the radio access network. It's not true. There are many other components. For example, every tower, every base station, you need connectivity. You can either lay a fiber or use microwave. Huawei actually do R&D to improve our microwave so that it can catch up with the 5G speed. So you may have a radio access network can do 5G speed, but your backend hall, the microwave is less than 5G speed. So what is the purpose? And even right down to power consumption. All these are important because traditionally to deploy a 5G base station, our competitors' 5G base station requires more power consumption than the previous 4G base station. So it means that when you change 5G base station, you need to change the power supply. But for Huawei, we are very conscious. Our 5G base station can use the same power supply as for the 4G base station. So it makes sense. So this whole system is interconnected. And this is why you want to design the best system, not just individual components. And this is why it put Huawei in a very advantageous position because of the layers of technology that we actually have, from the microprocessors to the operating system, to the server, to the storage, including database now, and to the cloud stack software, and even the AI modeling tools and so on. So the good thing about Huawei, because we have the whole stack, is much easier for us to optimize. But having said that, every layer is based on standards because we know in the real world, some customers need not buy everything from Huawei, or they have existing systems that we need to interoperate. So we are mindful of that as well.
And I think it's quite interesting because that strategy is hard to execute. I mean, theoretically, everybody wants to be a one-stop shop or provide that full suite. What do you think has been some of the trade-offs or investments that Huawei has had to make in order to be able to provide that coverage, but also have standards at each level?
I think, I'm not sure the history. Huawei started reselling some Hong Kong switches, whatever, if you look at the history of Huawei, right? But over the years, we built up all this system. And the first main industry we went in was telecommunication, right? Huawei, after all these switches, routers, we moved into telecommunication. And telecommunication industry totally dependent on Huawei, every layers of technology. So if you look at what Huawei is doing today, even our digital power, our UPS, our inverter, right down to our cloud stack software, our server storage networking, many of these were created to support the telecommunication industry. But from there, you realize it's actually the same stack. It's the same stack for different industry. But I'm sure there was some strategy behind to lead to this entire stack. And if you go back to public sector, because my experience is in public sector from a user to technology provider, I actually have a conclusion over my last 8 years experience in Huawei, why we are doing strongly in public sector globally, mainly for 3 reasons. The first reason is we have the end-to-end stack. Because you need to understand in public sector is different from other industry. Banking industry, the technical people they hire, they are really very technical because they build the system in-house, they maintain in-house. But most public sector, the technical people in most countries, obviously not some, like Singapore team is of course very strong. But in other countries, the government agency, the technical people are not so technical. They are more the operational person. They are the one writing the tender specification, managing the vendor. The actual project is left to a system integrator who won the contract, right? And very often a system can fail. And when a system fails, the database will blame operating system will blame the server will blame the connectivity. Everybody blame each other, even brand. But to my customer, they say, oh, at least Huawei, everything is yours. So if something goes wrong, you are responsible. There's no finger pointing. So actually many public sector customers like the fact that we have end-to-end. But of course, we must still win through the proper procurement process, the public tender and so on, right? That's the first reason. Second reason is Huawei, interestingly as a company, we are customer focused. We are really customer focused. We are willing to take risks at times just to meet the customer requirement. We are flexible, more flexible in that sense. Because I used to work for US company for 16 years. No means no. For example, Huawei, we don't do system integrator. We are not system integrator. We want to work with system integrator. But there are some developing countries where there's no local system integrator. So end up, they will say, look, you must help us lower the cost. If you bring in a Chinese system integrator or you bring in a Western system integrator, the cost will go up. So since Huawei has so many technology, why don't you also do system integration? So there are extreme cases where the customer strongly requests us to do system integration. We actually do that after analyzing the risk and of course the profit. So that is something I think our customer appreciate, the flexibility. Third, interestingly, based on feedback, is China's story. Because China, in terms of their effort of digital transformation, is also not that long ago. Probably started only 2-3 decades ago. But China being China, they move at China's speed. So China is creating a lot of very exciting digital transformation use cases. And the rest of the world, they know. The government, they know. So they want to see what China is doing. Obviously, they can't copy exactly what China is doing because the geopolitics environment is different, the budget is different, the digital literacy is different, right? But at least they know that is the outcome. So they are looking at the outcome to learn the China story. And many people know that because Huawei, we do have many customers in China, so we can share some of these use cases. Let me give you a simple use case. Hospitals. We started deploying LiDAR in hospital. You know, LiDAR is used for autonomous vehicle, right? Very good because of the accuracy and so on and so forth. So in hospital ward, obviously I cannot deploy cameras, infringe privacy, right? So what do? We use LiDAR with AI. So in LiDAR, obviously you cannot capture your face, cannot capture your body. To LiDAR, you are probably a stick, represent a stick. But using AI to analyze the stick, we can see whether a patient has fallen down. So it's detection solution without using video surveillance. And we did it in some hospital in China. So that is a use case. There are other countries, other hospitals. Wow, I never think of that. So this is why the element of Huawei being involved in China projects that can bring this success use case overseas is important. So these are the three factors. So the end-to-end is still important. But having said that, we are based on open standards. We are open to interoperate with other suppliers.
And I think what's interesting as well is that you always mention the three levels, right? There's an R&D side, I think there's a manufacturing side, and then there's also that frontline account management and responsibility, which I feel like that tends to be separated at three different layers in different ecosystems, but it feels like all three are together.
It's actually more than three. So the R&D is definitely one by itself. And in fact, Huawei, interestingly, our internal R&D, as I said, we have more than 100 people in R&D. You know what's the internal department name for the R&D? 2012. 2012. There was a Hollywood movie 2012, End of the World. So when Huawei created the R&D capability, we call it 2012 Lab. That's another culture I failed to mention. The Huawei sense of crisis is very high. Huawei's sense of crisis is very high. Everyone knows that we may just disappear tomorrow. We must strive on. So these are interconnected. So this sense of crisis obviously is not one of the 4 core values, but it's hidden somewhere. And can you imagine when we named the R&D Lab 2012, meaning we must be prepared for end of the world? It's very significant. So that's one layer. Then you have the manufacturing. But in terms of the customer facing, it's more than one layer. It's not just a sale. My organization, in Huawei, different industry has similar organization as me. We are the industry expert that do consulting and planning. We don't sell. It depends. Sometimes we sell, sometimes we don't sell because it depends on the country's procurement law. We are here to help customer with the digital transformation journey. I don't come here to just push you the whole stack of technology. We actually sit down with you to analyze your country's exist, what is the to-be vision. Then from there, what are the new use cases you can offer, whether it's in digital government, digital economy, or digital society. So from there, we are even looking at business architecture, not just the technology. So we are the one that drive your business to come out with a blueprint. We are not full-fledged consultant. We are not Accenture. We are not KPMG. But certain extent, we are doing some of this work to help the customer to say, hey, yeah, this is something we need to do. And you will ultimately lead to a project. So Huawei, you have many groups of us from different industry to do that industry consultancy and planning to help with that high-level design. Then from there, of course, there's sales. But there's another organization that's very strong in Huawei. It's the partner management. So partner management. Huawei is very partner-centric. Even though we have the whole stack, we still need a few partners. We need system integrator. We need software developers because we don't touch application. And we still maintain good relationship with KPMG, Deloitte, because some customers still need to pay lots of money to do proper consultancy. So we have different partnership. And as part of this partnership, around the world, we have opened a facility called Open Lab. So there's Open Lab in Bangkok, there's Open Lab in Singapore. In Open Lab, literally the whole stack of Huawei technology, hardware, software is there for our partners to test their application on our stack, to optimize it, and even go to market together. So some of the strong partners in Singapore, for example, after it's successfully done, bring them overseas. Because we know very well when people like me, the industry expert, help them to do the business architecture, at the end, Huawei can sell everything except the application. So I must have application partners ready to go to market with us. So it's more than 3 layers. So the R&D, the manufacturing, the customer facing has different layers.
Very interesting. And you and I mentioned that customer orientation is actually a big part of Huawei's culture. And the joke here, of course, is that every company claims to be customer-centric. Could you share any examples of how Huawei goes about doing it?
I think
what are different?
during Ebola, during COVID, these are great examples that we never say no to customer, we continue. And do you know, during COVID, I was there in Africa as well. We have some new products. Remember the inverter? And because of the restriction in traveling, Some of our experts couldn't travel to the country where inverter was sold. So when the product arrived at the port, we did not have the delivery person to install. But our salespeople actually went online to study, to learn all these things, and they themselves go and do delivery work. We are prepared to do that. The other example is in one of the major events. I will not mention which event. It was a major event during COVID. In fact, it was planned, but it was delayed. So our products all arrived in a warehouse. Unfortunately, someone was tested positive. So in this country, the Ministry of Health actually locked down the whole warehouse. But this international event organizer say, hey, the event is coming up next year. We can't wait. You better do it. You better do the installation. No, I know American companies' culture. They will probably say, we are not liable. You are the one that locked down. You can't blame us. Our goods did arrive. If you want to take action against us, we also take actions against you. But Huawei being customer focused, you know what we did? We ship in the same set of equipment, second set, just to make sure we can fulfill the delivery. Huawei go all out to really be customer focused. Whereas it's just a slogan in most companies, right? And this is another reason why customers trust us and why we continue to enjoy the growth in business, not just in innovation, our ability to meet the customer requirement, even the technology that I was telling you. How do we help the hospital to solve the problem of dropping the Wi-Fi connection? So all these are coming together is a great testimony to being customer focused.
Looking forward to the future, like you said, there's decoupling world, there's politics, and the environment is changing, but Huawei has obviously grown as well. What do you think are things that Huawei would change, and what are the ways you think Huawei will not change?
I think for once, that actually most of us foreigners in Huawei, we are very happy, is that because of the action by US, Huawei is forced to be more open. Because previously we don't like all this media publicity. We like to do our work, solve the customer problem, and make our money. But we actually become more transparent, which I think is good. And I think this change is good. I think one thing, at least in the foreseeable future, will not change is the investment in R&D, innovation. Because to me, Huawei, why we can survive all these attacks, why our business continue to do well, restriction on technology, including microprocessor, we continue to persevere and prevail, is because of the investment in R&D. I think that remains very important. And our invest in R&D is not just in China, it's globally. So we also have a lot of stakeholders in different countries. The moment we hire so many hundreds or thousands of people, we are helping the in-country economy. I think that's important.
On that note, could you share any personal stories about time being brave?
Brave? I'm just a normal person. I'm not a hero and not being brave. Of course, when I was in the police, there were many brave moments, but my family would say there was stupid movement. So did I think of the family? I do certain action to run after the criminal, this thing. Of course, I won't talk about that. But I think I won't use the word brave. The fact that even during COVID, I took the risk because at the time we were dealing with a lot of unknowns, that took the risk to go to Africa. Not only that helped a lot with our business, with the public sector customers, they really see that we are there to help. But that also helped a lot the internal, because even my colleagues in Africa, the Chinese or the local employees, the Chinese, many of them stayed on. They did not go back. They could see that a person like me at my age, in Huawei standard, I'm considered very old, by the way, that I was willing to be there to help the customer, to help the company. To them, that is brave. But to me, if you ask me, all the foreigners working in Huawei are brave, especially the non-Chinese that stay on the Huawei, that continue to work for the company, to continue to solve customer problems. They are all brave. Of course, we are all making money. We are not into politics. We are just one here to sell you the best innovation, the best technology, and money, and so on. But to me, as I emphasize, I've seen many foreigners joining Huawei, less than 1 year, less than 6 months, they resign. That's why these are all the brave people.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Jeremy, for your time. So hopefully with this conversation, we can give a better light to many people for them to judge who is Huawei, what is Huawei. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Brave. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. We would also appreciate you leaving a rating or review. Head over to www.bravesea.com for member content, resources, and community. Stay well and stay brave.